Hello, and welcome to My Brain is a Wonderland, a podcast for neurodivergent women and the people who love them. Welcome everyone, this is the first feature-length episode of My Brain is a Wonderland, and I'm so glad you're here. Today I want to talk about my diagnosis, how I was diagnosed, when I was diagnosed, and what led me to that diagnosis. I know in the neurodiverse community, I'm not sure, there are people who want a diagnosis and there are people who do not. And I was one of the people who sought a diagnosis, and I'm just going to discuss that with you, what it meant for me, the process to get there, and really what the straw that broke the camel's back was to get me there, because there was a straw and it broke the back for sure. A lot of you probably know, if I was diagnosed in the last couple of years, that what precipitated that was the pandemic. Our favorite thing we all want to forget, can't seem to forget because it keeps going on. 2020. The year of 2020, when the pandemic hit. And I've read online, anecdotally, on Reddit, on forums, that a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, 40s, who knows, realized that they were neurodivergent during the pandemic. It pushed a lot of people into a lot of funny spaces, cognitively, emotionally, physically, and a lot of people ended up being diagnosed because of that, and I was one of them. So let's start at the beginning. The beginning of the beginning. I'm not going to talk about my childhood, my misdiagnosis. I'm going to save that for another episode. I think that's key to put that in a separate experience. I'm going to talk about the 6 months or so leading up to the diagnosis. I was diagnosed. I had the test, the assessment in November 2020, received the diagnosis in December 2020. So how did it all start? Well, I had gotten a new job in December of 2019. And anyone who's listening who is neurodivergent or knows someone who is, may know that frequently jobs will become very boring or very overwhelming or very quickly. I'm talking 3 months or so. If you know a neurodivergent person or you are that person who jumps from job to job, that's okay. I'm that person too, and I have been that person. And I've discovered why I do that and what I can do to stop it now. And my diagnosis has helped me with that. But I was about 3 to 4 months into this new job. I'd started it in December 2019. So we're in March 2020 now. And by that time, I didn't realize it at the time, but the office that I was in was sensory hell for me. If you can picture this, I was in a cubicle with 4 people. Including myself. 4 people. A person in each corner. So it was a square cubicle. I'm in the northwest corner facing a window. I really struggled with that. Seeing outside the window, having the bright light on my face. I live in Florida. The sun is like death here. So that was a struggle. Behind me was another employee with his back to me in his corner. We all had L-shaped desks that filled the corners. To his left, he had his coworker. And to my right, with her back to that coworker, was my boss. So each corner was occupied by somebody, and our backs faced each other. There was no privacy. You couldn't take a moment to, blow your nose in peace, look up, what movie am I going to see tonight with my honey? There were none of that. It was all very exposed. And I don't know about you. Please tell me if anyone here experiences this. I don't like big open spaces. Big, empty, open spaces. They freak me out. I feel exposed. I feel like a nerve is exposed. And that cubicle did that for me, along with having to constantly communicate with the 3 other people in my cubicle and all the people walking back and forth in the office. These cubicles had low walls. This is an open plan office. I was one of those people who, got swept up in the open plan madness of the 90s. We don't want to be in our own cubicle. It's so sad and lonely. Let's all be together where the noise is unbearable. I went to an open plan elementary school, which looking back was absolutely awful. You could hear everything, see everything. It was not helpful. This was not helpful to me either, but I didn't realize it at the time. The only saving grace of this whole thing was that I had my back to the aisle, for God's sakes, so I didn't have to engage as much as, say, the guy who was behind me with his back to me, who was facing the aisle, and his coworker. Then across the aisle was a wall of manager offices with glass doors and windows, so you could never get away. They could always see you, always see what you were doing, make sure you were doing your work, all that stuff. It was suffocating. In addition to that, like I said, I was also getting bored. If I'm not in a job that offers a lot of learning, variety, I'm one of those people that if I don't have that, I check out pretty quick. So I like those jobs, my current job, where I can go online and do their learning paths, play videos and lectures, just to feel, and not just to feel because I am, just to grow constantly. If I don't have that thing pulling me forward, I am dead inside. So I was there at that point. Sensory overload without even realizing. Boredom, I realized that. And then my executive dysfunction was off the charts. Maybe not off the charts at that point. It was getting there, though. And I could feel it. Before we locked down for the pandemic, I could feel it. I was missing a couple of emails. My desk was a bit of a mess at work. I would run out the door. I had to have a key card with me every day. Constantly lost it. I had to clock in at one point 4 times a day. Clock in and out for lunch to get there to leave everything. And I just couldn't do it. So I was already struggling with these little things. Another thing is that in January of 2020, so this is 3 months prior to March, January, before everything hit the fan, my husband and I had adopted 2 dogs together. Now let me tell you, I love these little things to death, but good Lord, I would not recommend it to anybody. And I'm going to do an episode about that because looking after someone else, child, fuzzy or not, very difficult. I don't have children, I just have the fuzzy ones right now. And it's, I imagine, much like having 2 fuzzy 3-year-old twins that never grow up, cannot talk, eat their own poop, and drive you absolutely up the wall. So I'll do an episode about that, but that's where I was at. We had 2 new dogs, I'd been in a new job, it was driving me nuts, my senses were all over the place without realizing. Cue the pandemic. So it was March 2020, and I had already been catastrophizing this thing like crazy. It's what I love to do, love to obsess, love to pick on the one thing that isn't good and obsess it into the ground. And that's what I was doing with this. My manager, who worked next to me in the cubicle, in this 4-person cubicle, she was Italian. And if you know anything about the pandemic, Italy was one of the first countries, if not the first, I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, in Europe to shut down completely. As in, lockdown, you're going home, no work. You can go to the grocery store, but you gotta be 6 feet away, wear a mask, walk in the same direction, all that stuff. You know how it was at the beginning. They were one of the first. And so I'm English. now an American naturalized citizen for many years, for over a decade. And we kept in touch with what was going on in Europe, me and my Italian manager. In early March, maybe late February, we saw what was happening, and we were freaking out. I mean, absolutely freaking out. And most of the time, well, not most of the time, but I will often catastrophize things that aren't going to happen, right? It's a 1% chance this is going to happen. COVID? Oof. I felt like it was coming in hot. And, hate to be right, but it came in hot. And there were a lot of people in America saying, you know, it's not going to happen. A lot of my coworkers, it's fine, it's not going to get here, blah, blah, blah. And I just couldn't see how it couldn't get here. You know, we got planes. I don't know how it couldn't get over here. I was catastrophizing. We're all going to die. Everyone's going to die. I'm going to die. Husband's going to die. It's going to be a slow, painful death. Not being able to breathe. It's going to be awful. Awful. Absolutely awful. So this is me building up to March 2020. Already thinking I'm dying. Dealing with a lot at home with the dogs. That may sound dramatic to a lot of people, but it was a real struggle at the time. And dealing with a job that was also a struggle. So the week would have been March 16th-ish. The NBA had already shut down. They'd already said season's done, which is wackadoo. I mean, that was like, what? I don't know if baseball had shut down at that point. Big institutions like New York museums, these big, you know, the Met, things like that, were saying, we're closing indefinitely. Well, that's scary. I don't like that word, indefinitely. That was scary. And so we went through the weekend, me and my husband, and stuff was just closing down left and right. We had an annual sporting event in my town that didn't happen. It's the end of a season of events that culminates in not my hometown, the town that I live in, and it didn't happen. The mayor canceled it. It was shocking. So that Monday, I hadn't heard anything, so I'm going into work. So I go into work. I get there. I have to key in. There's security. I don't remember if security was there because you can just key in and walk in. And then I go up to the office. And there's no one there. Nobody. Just me. And I look around, and there's 3 other people, and they're all in the same department, kind of quietly whispering to each other, looking anxious. Seems like they're doing something. I get onto my email, and there's an email from upper management that says, so as you know that we're closing, blah, 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 clearly referencing some other email or phone call that I have not received. I call my manager, the Italian lady. She hadn't received any notice either. And we realize that we are locked down now. We get told that we're going to go into lockdown for at least 6 weeks. This ends up being 3 or 4 months in the end. And I tell you what, I'm just so sensitive, guys. I really didn't like how that happened. It hurt my feelings, first of all, that no one told me, and no one told my manager. That hurt my feelings. And it made me feel, just no one cared. I mean, that's not a good way to start the pandemic. No one cares. Whatever. So I go home, and this is the beginning of lockdown. My husband had to go into work for 2 weeks after that. He wasn't doing anything. No one was coming in, but they had him go in for 2 weeks after that until they finally told him, you know, this is done. You can claim unemployment now. So I'm at home and, you know, my husband's saying, enjoy it, you know, have fun, play a video game, eat some cake, snuggle the dogs, live life. I couldn't get there. I tell you guys, I was a mess from the beginning. And here's the thing. I say a mess, but it was a very strange, quiet mess. If you've heard Jamila Jamil talk about this, and she is an absolute awesome person. If you don't know who she is an actress, a British actress. She was in The Good Place. If you haven't seen that, go watch that. Jeez. but she talked about her depression. She's a mental health advocate, and she talked about her depression from her 20s on a talk show. I don't know, Conan or Jimmy, whoever. And she said that in her 20s, she was really depressed, but she didn't know because she was looking for indicators of sadness, crying. What else is sadness? Looking sad? I don't know. Being not happy in general. Having an outward emotion that is not typical for you. And I did not have any of that. I was dead inside. And Jamil talks about this, that she was looking for those indicators when actually she was numb. And that's how I was. I spent those 3 months in a combination of doom scrolling online while my dogs laid on parts of my body while I was flat on my back. I did play a little bit of Animal Crossing and a little bit of the Oculus VR, but otherwise I felt nothing. I remember my mother-in-law asking me, how are you doing? How's your mental health? She's a doctor, so it's not weird for her to kind of ask that, and we're very close. And I said, it comes and goes, but I'm fine. I mean, I really thought I was fine. And so 3 or 4 months later, in June, we went back to work. I went back to work. My husband hadn't gone back to work. I went back to work. And because my current position, because of COVID, didn't have much to do, they gave me 2 jobs. Yay! Anyone here who's neurodivergent and listening to this probably just vomited. I was already struggling prior to this. Then I went through the pandemic, went through lockdown, had to go back to work, and didn't just slot back into what I was going to do. I was given 2 jobs to manage, which fine, I wanted to keep my job, and at the time I was happy to do it. I didn't know what was going on with me. I thought, yep, that's fine. And it didn't go well. There was a point where my manager came to me and said, you're not doing very well. She didn't ask me, she told me. And she said, you know that, right? You're not doing very well. And God, if you could have been a fly on the wall, I tell you, this would have been hilarious. Because I thought I was killing it. I thought I was rocking it. I mean, not like changing lives, but I thought I was doing my job. And when she said that, mask went on, and I just went, oh, yeah, sure, I'm so sorry that, the pandemic's really put me through it. I am so sorry. I didn't realize. I did. No, I did. Yeah, sorry. And she walked away, and I was floored. I thought I was doing amazing. I thought, considering everything, I was doing great. I wasn't doing great at all. And so that freaked me out. That really freaked me out. And that was the catalyst that led me to going to therapy. I had tried therapy a couple of times in the past when I had access to it cheaply. I'd go once and then never go back. It was just emotional and weird, and I don't know. I don't like to go to new places, do new things, meet new people, blah, blah, blah. Definitely don't want to do therapy. And so I found out, as everyone knew, that therapy during the pandemic could be done online. And I thought, that's easy. I just gotta, plug in my computer, go into a room, ba-da-da-da. So I found a lady who dealt with a couple of different things that I wanted to address. She dealt with bereavement. My father died when I was 4 years old, and it's still something I don't haven't dealt with, isn't resolved in my life. And I thought I might have ADHD. This is what I said on the intake thing. Think I might have ADHD, and I haven't been dealing well with my dad dying. I thought about the ADHD because, like a lot of you probably, I'd taken every frickin' survey and test, quote unquote, under the sun online. And if you had emotional regulation problems, problems with organization, problems with socializing, you had a personality disorder, you were bipolar, you had ADHD, you were autistic. I tested most likely to have for all of these things. My grandmother had been diagnosed with bipolar a couple of decades prior, but I didn't think I had it at the time. I would do the tests and they were like, oh, you could have it, but I didn't think I had the episodes that they talk about that they had. I just felt like I was living, up here, and my hand is above my eyeballs right now. All the time. I didn't think I was like someone with bipolar who was, where it would come out, I don't know, occasionally, all the time, I'm not really sure. But these manic episodes, I didn't seem to have them. I seemed to just be struggling all the time. And so I went to her. Well, I didn't go to her. I just logged in online. And she knew this stuff about me that I had put on there. And we started talking. And I'll tell you right now, if you've never been to therapy, I don't know how you're going to react, but I bawled like a baby. Probably the first few weeks of appointments. I was going twice a week at that point. I had the time, I had the money, I had good health insurance, I still do now. And so I decided to go twice a week because I needed it. And we were talking, I would tell her things that I struggled with, this, that, and the other. And maybe 6 weeks into it, she said to me, after I'd said something like, oh, I just don't see it, I just don't remember or something. She said, Emily, I think you might have ADHD. And would you like to get tested for it? And I said, yeah, I would love to. If you can't tell me for sure, I would like the lowdown. So she recommended me to a neuropsychologist. I had already been engaged with, she was a psychologist, I'd already been engaged with a psychiatrist regarding my depression. And so I went to this neuropsychologist, and this lady, had a 6-week wait, and it had to be an in-person assessment for it to be accurate. So I set up that appointment for 6 weeks out. I also, during that time, I went to HR at my job. I had been struggling, as you know. My boss had already come to me and said, you're not doing well. And at that point, I was having to clock in and out I think at that time, 4 times a day. So clock in, clock out for lunch, clock back in, clock out at the end of the day. And I would forget most of those clock-ins, to be quite honest with you. And so I went to HR and said, I burst into tears. It was, oh God, it was horrible. I burst into tears. The gentleman was very nice. And I said, I'm dealing with this. I'm worried I'm going to get fired. He said, I've heard great things about you. I don't think you're going to be fired. And told him that I was waiting for an ADHD assessment, that I'd gone to therapy. He said, good for you. Proud of you. This sounds like it went very well. It went very well initially. I'll do another episode about this. Spoiler alert, it went terribly eventually. This isn't a comment on whether you should tell your HR, but I don't think I ever am going to tell anyone ever again. So I told them, and it was okay at first. They backed off and gave me accommodations right away. But eventually it didn't work out quite very well. And so this was the 6-week interim prior to getting the assessment. So the 6 weeks goes by and I show up for the assessment. It's a 6-hour assessment, so there was no one else in this lady's office. No one else could have been. That was nice. Showed up, no one else is there, and she gives me an iPad and tells me to start answering the questions on it. These questions, there's probably 500 to 1,000, something like that, and I was responding to them throughout the day. I think it was either true or false, or one of those. 1 for strongly disagree, 5 for strongly agree, or whatever. And it was, how do you feel about this? Have you ever done this? Do you like this? Do you hate that? Have you ever felt this? Have you ever felt that? And just tried to answer honestly, though I hate those things because I'm one of those. Strongly agree, depending, but you had to be very clear about yes or no. And I did that, and then she brought me into her office, and she started with an effort test. And the effort test is to make sure I'm there and actually putting effort into this 6-hour crazy exam. And she'll give you a thing and it has a pattern on it or something, and you have to write the pattern over and over again. And I am a huge people pleaser, so loved doing that and had no issue with that. And she said that in my written report. Check. Haha. And it went for 6 hours. There was a lunch break in between. I don't know if it was 7 or 5 in the end. I forget. But it had all different kinds of tests. She did an IQ test. I didn't realize that was done in the middle. She did a test where I was on a computer and had to look for patterns, which I couldn't find at all. She read me stories that I had to say back to her, which I couldn't do. She gave me a hearing test, probably just to check if the auditory processing issues that I had were actually due to a hearing issue, which I had my hearing tested when I was 5 years old because I didn't respond to my name in school, which is a classic sign of autism. I'm going to go over that in my episode of my misdiagnosis. And so I'd had that before and had stellar hearing, and I had stellar hearing here. Then I also they would show me a picture, and kind of a geometric picture, like a boat or something with all these angles and stuff, and I would have to, they'd take the picture away and I'd have to redraw it. I thought I did well in that, but I did like average to under or something with that, which is strange. I don't know. There were just a lot of things that happened that I didn't realize I was bad at, which was helpful. And so I did that test, the 6-hour test. I went home after that. She told me it would be another month before I would get the results. I got the results by Zoom, which I think is probably how they would do it now. I don't know why you'd have to go in, and I'd rather get a Zoom call than a phone call. And it was a couple of days after Christmas, December 2020, and she sat me down. I sat myself down. I was with my husband. He was sitting right next to me, and she said, there was a preamble, blah, 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 and then said, based on your test, you most likely, I don't think they say definitely ever as a doctor, most likely have ADHD, which I thought, yep, okay, ka-ching, check, done, I've got ADHD, let's move on and figure out how to fix this. Then she said, and based on your myriad of sensory issues, you more than likely have autism spectrum disorder. Which, like I said, had come up on the tests. That wasn't a complete surprise, but it wasn't completely expected either. I burst into tears. I think there was a lot of relief there. And here's what she said, which I don't want to sound dramatic, but this changed my life. She said, I did an IQ test on you, and you have above average intelligence. I don't think she said very intelligent. I don't know. It's in my written report. I have above average intelligence on my IQ test. And probably what has happened is that I, in the past, have felt capable, have been capable, and so I pursue things, let's say a promotion or a social interaction, and once I get there, I really struggle. I start to fall apart, like I said, within the 3-month bracket, I'm struggling. And this is why. You're not stupid. You are capable. You're just not typical. And hearing that hit me like a ton of bricks. It hit my self-esteem so hard, having told myself, you are difficult. You are overambitious. And actually, I'm not. I had just been telling myself these negative narratives that other people had said to me. And I cried some more. Then I started to think, okay, what can we do here? And just to warn you, you will get a written report, and it might be eye-opening. My written report had something in there that I knew was true and didn't like because I knew it was true. And she said, Emily likes to be seen negatively. She wants you to feel sorry for her and wants you to feel bad for her. And I remember reading that and going, how dare you? How? Wait a minute, that's true. And that's why it bothered me, because I knew it was true. And I didn't like that it was true. So just to warn you, they're not going to be mean, but they are going to be honest. So you'll learn maybe some stuff about you didn't want to know. Maybe I'll do an episode with my written report one day and I'll go over it. Another thing at the end of the report is they give you a bunch of strategies, books to read, things that might help you at home and work, and that has helped me radically in so many different ways. And I just want to say, like I said prior, you don't have to get a diagnosis if you don't feel that's right for you. Here's what I will say, though, if you're on the fence. You are all you have in this life. Your brain, your body, your soul. You are important, and learning more about who you are, what you need, and why you're here is valid. If you are thinking, I'm not sure, maybe, I can afford it, do it. I can't see why learning about yourself, your unique, special self, could be a bad thing. You're worth it. And with that, I want to end this episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions for me, comments, if this resonated with you, and I hope it did, please connect with me. I have an Instagram, My Brain is a Wonderland Pod. I have a TikTok, also My Brain is a Wonderland Pod. My email is mybrainisaWonderlandpod@gmail.com. And if you liked what you heard today, please review this podcast wherever you're getting your podcasts. I'm on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. I would really appreciate that and would really love to hear your feedback. I can't wait to keep embarking on this journey with you, and I'll see you next time.